What would you think if I told you? The strongest man in the room is often the one no one notices, not because he hides in cowardice, but because he has mastered the art of presence without spectacle. In a world addicted to noise, his silence roars, while others drape themselves in the currency of attention. Louder voices, brighter clothes, inflated egos. He walks unadorned, holding something far more dangerous than charm or wit. The unshakable stillness of a man who has nothing to prove. The invisible man is not unseen because he lacks form. He is unseen because he refuses the theater of masks. His essence does not crave the eyes of strangers, nor the fragile applause of the crowd. He stands at the edge of the social tide, letting the waves crash without rushing to be swept away. And in that restraint lies his first virtue, self-possession. The Stoics called it autarkeia, the fullness found within oneself, unshaken by fortune's rise or fall. He has made peace with the fact that most people are prisoners of their own projections. They see not the man himself, but the mirror of their desires, fears, and insecurities. The invisible man does not fight to correct their illusions. He lets them see what they wish, for he knows the truth lives beyond the reach of their gaze. Every judgment cast at him is nothing more than air-striking stone. Every dismissal only sharpens his ability to live without permission. You may have felt this pull, the strange dignity of walking away from the stage, of no longer auditioning for love, respect, or belonging. It feels like a kind of death at first, the ego gasping for its old fix. But stay with it long enough, and you begin to taste the clarity. When you do not live for their recognition, their rejection cannot wound you. When you stop asking, "Do they see me?" a deeper question emerges. Do I see myself? The invisible man has looked into that question until its silence answered back. He has seen the shadow, the buried hunger for validation, the infant cry that once begged for a parent's approval, the old scars left by betrayals and humiliations. He has not run from them. He has made his home there, in the underworld of the self. For the man who has befriended his shadow no longer fears the darkness of others. He becomes unbribable by flattery, unshaken by insult. To the casual observer, this makes him dangerous, not because he wields violence, but because he cannot be easily controlled. The machinery of social power runs on the need to be seen, liked, and approved of. But what can you take from a man who has learned to live without it? This is why the invisible man unnerves the boastful and the insecure. They cannot measure him by the usual scales, for he refuses to step on them. And yet, this invisibility is not withdrawal from life. It is not bitterness or cynicism. It is a deliberate shedding of false skins until only the essential remains. The invisible man still acts, still creates, still moves through the world, but he does so without theatrics, without the exhausting performance of constant self-advertisement. His movements are precise, like a blade honed by years of discipline. Every step taken is chosen, not compelled. Imagine walking into a room and feeling no need to impress, no twitch of anxiety at the thought of being ignored. Imagine carrying your worth as a stone carries its weight, silent, unarguable, unpolished. The invisible man moves this way. His power is not in being the loudest, but in being the most anchored. And though many overlook him at first, when storms come, they notice who remains unmoved. But this discipline does not come cheaply. It requires the slow dismantling of vanity, the burning away of those parts of the self that were built only to please others. It demands a kind of mourning. For the boy who once thought admiration was the same as love. For the man who once thought attention was proof of existence. The invisible man has buried these illusions, and in their place grows a quiet, incorruptible strength. To become invisible in this way is not to vanish. It is to step into a realm where the self is no longer chained to the gaze of others. It is a freedom most never taste, because most cannot bear the loneliness required to earn it. But the Stoics knew, the man who is content in his own company holds the keys to every other freedom. He can walk into the world without hunger, without fear, without the desperate itch for eyes upon him. And that, in a society drunk on spectacle, is the rarest form of power. There is a second virtue in the invisible man, one harder to detect, but more transformative than the first: the quiet mastery of restraint. Restraint is not mere inaction, nor is it the timidity of one too fearful to act. It is the art of choosing one's battles with surgical precision, letting countless provocations dissolve into the void without giving them the dignity of a response. In a culture that glorifies instant reaction, the invisible man moves like a stone beneath the river's surface, feeling the current, yet refusing to be carried away by it. The Stoics taught that every impulse to speak, to defend, to strike back is a moment where a man's inner kingdom is tested. Epictetus spoke of the discipline to distinguish between what lies within our control and what belongs to the chaos beyond it. The invisible man has made this discernment his constant practice. When the insult comes, he tastes it before deciding if it is worth swallowing. When temptation presents itself, the sweet bait of vengeance, the intoxication of being right, he does not bite without measuring the cost. You may know the sensation, the urge to reply to a cutting remark, to expose the ignorance of another, to prove, in some glorious way, that you cannot be underestimated. It is intoxicating because it feeds the ego's hunger for dominance. But with every such indulgence, you surrender a piece of your peace. The invisible man understands this and guards his peace as a king guards his treasury. He knows that silence, when chosen, is not weakness. It is the sharpest refusal to be governed by another's chaos. There is a peculiar dignity in not showing your weapons until the battlefield is worth it. The invisible man has no need to win every skirmish. He chooses wars that matter. In doing so, he keeps his spirit from becoming ragged by constant conflict. This is why his victories, when they do come, are decisive. He enters only when the stakes align with his values, and he leaves with minimal waste of energy or time. Such restraint is born from something deeper than strategy. It is born from an intimacy with his own shadow. He has mapped the territory of his anger, traced the lines of his pride, studied the reflexes that once made him a puppet. By naming these forces within himself, he has loosened their grip. No one can easily provoke a man who has already stood naked before his own inner fire and lived to tell the tale. It is not that he feels nothing. It is that he feels, and then decides. Restraint gives him an aura others cannot place. Some mistake it for aloofness, others for an almost dangerous composure. Both are correct. It is the composure of a man who has no need to spend himself cheaply. His silence carries the weight of withheld power, and those attuned to it feel the latent force beneath. In the modern world, this quality is nearly extinct. Men are taught that visibility comes from constant assertion, from filling every pause, defending every inch, proving their worth in public contests. Restraint feels alien because it does not feed the audience's appetite for drama. But the invisible man does not live for the audience. He lives for the invisible structure within, that unshakable framework of principle that will outlast the whims of the crowd. Sometimes, his restraint means walking away from the praise he could easily claim. Sometimes, it means allowing another to take the credit, letting the shallow collect their shallow rewards. He knows that the applause of the many is not the same as the respect of the few who matter. More importantly, he knows that neither applause nor respect can give him the inner stability he already owns. And so, his life moves with a different rhythm. He may vanish from the heated arguments that others mistake for importance. He may choose silence when silence feels unbearable to those around him. He may let an opportunity pass when it demands he compromise his center. To the hurried, reactive world, these look like losses. To the invisible man, they are the purest victories, the victories of a man who remains uncorrupted by the games of lesser minds. In this, he mirrors the Stoic image of the fortress self, a citadel unbreached, not because no one attacked, but because its gates could not be baited open. Restraint is his second virtue, and like the first, it is invisible to those who have never known the strength it requires. But to the one who begins to see, it is the mark of a man whose soul answers to no master but his own reasoned will. The third virtue of the invisible man is precision, the disciplined clarity with which he moves through the labyrinth of life. Precision is not merely efficiency, it is the refusal to scatter one's force across 1,000 unworthy aims. Where others lunge at every flicker of opportunity, he studies the pattern beneath the chaos, waiting until the path is certain enough to warrant his step. In a world obsessed with speed, he has learned the deeper value of accuracy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you seek tranquility, do less, or rather, do what's essential." The invisible man embodies this by cutting away the ornamental and unnecessary, not just in possessions or speech, but in the very architecture of his days. He does not perform the 1,000 small acts that win the moment, but weaken the whole. Instead, each decision is weighed against the unshakable axis of his purpose. This makes him appear slow to some, but those who watch closely see that his movement, when it comes, is without hesitation. You may have felt the exhaustion of trying to be everywhere at once, the erosion of spirit that comes from saying yes to every demand, every request, every false urgency. Precision is the antidote to this death by distraction. It forces you to confront a hard truth. Most of what clamors for your attention is meaningless noise, and most of what drains your energy does not deserve the gift of your life. The invisible man has long since made this distinction. He does not need to be known for everything. He chooses to be known, perhaps only to himself, for what truly matters. His speech reflects this same discipline. Words are chosen not for ornament, but for impact. He does not flood the air with explanations. He drops sentences like stones into water, letting the ripples carry their own weight. To those who measure intelligence by verbosity, this can be disorienting. But the invisible man knows that power is not in the volume of speech, but in the precision of meaning. Such precision extends into his relationships. He does not collect people as proof of worth. He does not keep company out of fear of solitude. Every bond he maintains serves the mutual elevation of spirit, or it quietly fades from his circle. This can make him seem distant, but it is not distance. It is discernment. He understands that the wrong presence in one's life can be more destructive than the absence of any presence at all. Beneath this discipline lies a psychological truth few dare face. To live with precision, one must confront the chaos within. The invisible man has sat in the stillness and listened to the noise of his own inner world, the competing desires, the old wounds dressed as ambitions, the ancestral voices urging him to prove what no longer needs proving. He has separated the voice of the essential self from the static of the false self, and it is to this essential voice that he now answers. This is why his work, when it emerges, carries such depth. Whether he builds with his hands or his mind, the result is free of the scattered energy that plagues those who move without aim. What he creates bears the unmistakable mark of intention. Nothing added for show, nothing missing through carelessness. And though he may never stand in the spotlight, his influence weaves quietly through the fabric of things, shaping outcomes in ways even the actors upon the stage may never realize. For the invisible man, precision is also an act of mercy. By refusing to waste himself on the trivial, he preserves his strength for what demands his highest self, and in doing so, he frees others from the burden of his half-hearted presence. When he is with you, he is fully with you. When he is gone, he is entirely gone. There is no residue, no lingering shadow of a man stretched too thin. The modern world misunderstands this and calls it coldness. But in truth, it is love stripped of performance. A love that comes without the strings of obligation, without the corrosion of resentment. It is the same mercy he extends to himself, to be where he is meant to be, doing only what is worth doing, speaking only what is worth saying. Precision, then, is not just a virtue. It is a shield. It protects him from the seduction of endless engagement, from the restless need to validate his existence through constant motion. It reminds him that life is not a race to touch every surface, but a slow carving toward the center of what is real. And so, step by step, word by word, the invisible man moves through the world like an archer who never wastes an arrow. He will not impress the hurried. They cannot understand how stillness can lead to impact. But those who have felt the difference between a scattered life and a precise one will see it immediately. And they will know they are in the presence of someone who does nothing by accident. The fourth virtue of the invisible man is endurance, not the loud, theatrical endurance of one who suffers for admiration, but the deep, bone-set stamina of one who accepts the nature of existence without bargaining for comfort. Endurance, in his form, is not the shallow pride of surviving a single hardship. It is the quiet, unbroken line that stretches across years, through seasons of loss, change, and isolation, without shattering his inner architecture. The Stoics knew this well. Seneca wrote that the man who suffers before it is necessary, suffers more than he needs. The invisible man has absorbed this truth into the marrow of his being. He does not collapse under the weight of what might come. He meets the present pain without adding the poison of imagined futures. In this, he moves differently from most. For where others exhaust themselves in anticipation of storms, he saves his strength for the moment they actually arrive. You may recognize this in your own life, the endless rehearsals of disaster that drain you before reality even knocks on the door. Endurance, in its truest form, begins with the refusal to live twice through the same suffering, once in thought, once in fact. The invisible man does not waste his spirit on rehearsals. He does not walk in dread of what may be, nor does he waste time longing for what was. His eyes are fixed on the only place endurance is forged, the living instant before him. But endurance is not passive. It is not waiting, with bowed head, for fate to strike. It is the active choice to keep moving forward, to place one foot in front of the other, when every inner voice whispers that stopping would be easier. The invisible man has walked through the heat of humiliation, the ice of solitude, and the fog of uncertainty, and he has done so without broadcasting his journey for pity or applause. He carries his battles in silence, and it is in this silence that they harden into strength. There is a certain kind of resilience that is almost invisible because it does not beg to be seen. It lives in the way he does not flinch when the world changes its temperature overnight. It shows in the way he adapts to loss without letting it define him. It breathes in the way he meets failure, not as an identity, but as a temporary shape the road has taken beneath his feet. This virtue is rare in an age addicted to instant gratification. Most seek the path of least resistance, abandoning ship at the first sign of difficulty. But the invisible man has made peace with the truth that all worthwhile roads are paved with discomfort, repetition, and patience. He understands that the fruit worth having does not ripen on demand, and so he plants, tends, and waits, season after season, without shouting into the void for results to hurry. His endurance is also emotional. He does not abandon love at the first sign of conflict, nor loyalty at the first test of inconvenience. He understands that bonds worth keeping are not without friction, and that the sharp edges between people can polish character if met with steadiness. Yet, his endurance is never an excuse for self-betrayal. He knows when a bond has turned from challenge into corrosion, and he has the strength to walk away without dragging bitterness behind him. Underneath this lies the deepest layer of his stamina, the refusal to be broken by his own mind. He has learned to stand in the presence of grief without rushing to erase it, to breathe in the air of uncertainty without suffocating, to bear the heat of longing without letting it turn into desperation. These are not the visible feats of endurance, no medals, no applause, but they are the kind that rebuild the soul from the inside out. The invisible man does not romanticize hardship. He does not seek it for the sake of proving his toughness. But when hardship comes, as it always will, he greets it as a known adversary, not an intruder. And in meeting it without surprise or complaint, he robs it of half its power. Endurance, to him, is not about outlasting others. It is about outlasting the versions of himself that would have surrendered. It is the steady hand that writes the story while chaos tries to tear the pages away. It is the pulse that keeps beating in the long night, the breath that refuses to stop, even when there seems no reason to continue. And so, whether or not anyone sees him, whether or not history remembers his name, the invisible man keeps moving, not because the world rewards it, but because stopping would mean betraying the quiet covenant he has made with himself, to live fully until life itself withdraws its permission. The fifth and final virtue of the invisible man is detachment, the rare art of holding the world without clutching at it. It is not coldness nor indifference, but the freedom to engage deeply without fastening chains of possession around people, outcomes, or identities. In detachment, he moves like water, touching all it passes, nourishing where it can, yet never clinging, never trapped. To most, detachment feels like loss. They cannot imagine loving without owning, giving without expecting, standing close without leaning. But the invisible man has seen the prison built from grasping, how the desire to secure what is fragile only quickens its breaking, how the fear of losing becomes the very thing that suffocates joy. And so, he releases. Not because he does not care, but because he cares enough to let life flow as it will. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." The invisible man lives this, not as a quote to recite, but as a rhythm of being. When fortune comes, he does not swell with the illusion that it is his by divine right. When fortune departs, he does not shatter, as though robbed of something essential. He knows that nothing truly his can be taken, and nothing taken was ever truly his. This detachment is not cultivated in comfort. It is forged in the fire of repeated loss. He has loved and been left, built and seen it crumble, believed and been betrayed. Each time, the temptation came to close his heart, to swear off trust, to shield himself in bitterness. But instead, he learned the paradox, that by loosening his grip, he could hold more, that only the open hand can feel the shape of what passes through it. To live detached is to step outside the market of validation, where most spend their lives bargaining. He does not trade his peace for the currency of likes, titles, or approval. When praise comes, he receives it with a nod and lets it pass. When criticism comes, he sifts it for truth and discards the poison. Neither lifts him too high, nor drags him too low, for his balance is rooted in something the world cannot touch. You may think this makes him solitary, and in some ways, it does. But his solitude is not exile, it is sovereignty. It is the space in which he can love without the hunger to possess, serve without the hidden ledger of expectation, create without the desperation for applause. And from this place, his connections become richer, not poorer. For those who remain in his orbit know they are there by choice, not by force. Detachment gives him an almost unshakable composure. The world may swirl with reversals, wealth to poverty, favor to disgrace, birth to death, but he walks as one who has already made peace with the truth. All of it will pass. This is not a reason to despair, but the very reason to engage fully while it lasts. When you do not clutch at the flower, you are free to breathe in its fragrance without crushing it in your grasp. He is invisible not because he hides, but because he does not stand where the crowd demands he stand. In the arena of comparison, the auction of worth, the theater of constant proving, his worth is already anchored in the unchanging ground within, and from that ground, he can watch the tides of gain and loss, of affection and rejection, without losing his footing. The invisible man's life is not free of pain. No human life is, but his pain is clean, free of the extra suffering born of clinging. When grief comes, he feels it fully, but does not bind himself to its ghost. When joy comes, he savors it, but does not chain himself to its return. This is the highest freedom, for it leaves him undefeated by either. And so he walks on, silent, steady, unseen, in the way that matters to the restless, but unmistakable to those who have eyes for the real. His virtues are not displayed like medals. They are woven into the grain of his being. Self-possession, restraint, precision, endurance, detachment. Together, they form the invisible armor of a man who does not need the world to see him in order to move through it like a force of nature. And for those who wonder whether such a path is worth it, whether the price of invisibility is too high, he offers no persuasion, only the example of a life unchained. For in the end, the man who needs nothing is the man who can give everything, and the man who seeks no crown is the one who walks with the quiet dignity of kings.